What's up, guys? It's your boy Alma-sensei back with a new Naruto What If. OC becomes Sasuke after the 4th Shinobi War. OC x Sakura x Karin. Follow the MC as he grapples with the reality of becoming Sasuke and the disastrous consequences he faces in the wake of the previous Sasuke's misguided ambition to become a world tyrant and his journey to gain power to fill in the big shoes of Sasuke as the shadow protector of the Shinobi world. If you love my content, consider buying me a coffee. Link in the description. Like the video, share, and subscribe. Remember to check out the author of this fantastic fanfic. Link in the description. With all that out of the way, let's get into it. The battle that started lifetimes ago was now reaching its end. Two fates clashed with each other. Two beliefs and two entities. Yet one of them must perish for the other to flourish. One must make way for the other to move forward. The two of them faced each other in silence, hesitant yet more determined. Silence persists as sound is unwilling to intervene. A foreboding breeze blew softly. Unseen, unheard yet felt. The two jumped down and landed on a body of water. Miracle followed as they both ran on the water as if on land. Gravity did not pull them down, liquid offered a foothold, and the deep waters refused to swallow them. They ran towards each other, meeting right at the space in the middle. Their forearms collided, and the sound was enthusiastic to announce its presence. The shockwave erupted from the clash, and the water below caved in and spread waves. Then the world waited as the battle ensued. The destruction of land, the splitting of the sky, and the demolition of mountains. Only after all these did the fight near its end. What first started as a battle of strength, technique, and power was now a clash between faith and sheer will. In the beginning, they used their spirit and body to fabricate their assaults. Now, their hearts fueled their attacks. The two fought, throwing punches and kicks, which were nothing but a disgrace to the power they displayed before. The punches looked insignificant compared to the catastrophic attacks they had displayed before, like seeing an ant after a blue whale. But the eye only sees, so it did not know the belief held in those seemingly insignificant punches. The determination behind those minor kicks. The pain and promises contained in those mundane attacks. It was an argument that transcended beyond words. Both tell the other to move, and both answer no. They were stubborn, the other even more so. Both of them were in excruciating pain and unbelievable exhaustion. But it was simply not enough to make them give up and stop. The only way to make me stop, they thought, is by killing me. Unknown POV Pain was an old friend who had accompanied me most of my life. But it was never welcomed. I struggled to get up because of it and received a punch in the face. I was shaken and fell. Some distance away. My opponent was determined not to let the opportunity pass. I see, even as his body pleaded with him to just lie down, he pushed through it and approached me wobbly with a ball of blue energy in his right hand. I tried to get up as soon as possible, fearing that the next attack might be my end. But my fears were unnecessary as I saw my opponent trip himself. His body had let him down, and he fell face first on the stony ground. Pack. What a dumbus, it was so much like him. It was funny, but given the situation, it does not tickle my funny bone. I dragged myself on top of him as he was turning on his back. I brought my hands up and threw them down on his face with all my strength. I did this again and again. I pummeled him many times. My fists connected, the blood was proof of that. But it felt like my attacks never reached him. At least not the place I wanted it to reach. And I think my feeling was right, considering he was able to grab me by the collar and headbutt me. I was dizzy and he slipped out from me and kicked me right in my stomach, making me stagger back. Ouch. That hurts. Not only because of his headbutt, but also because he did not use the shuriken beside him to slice my throat while I was dizzy. He ignored the chance to kill me. Instead of a killing blow, he gave me a very lame kick, which I barely felt. But that lame kick was a devastating attack on my pride. Here I am fighting with all I have, what I consider to be the greatest and most important battle in my life. And my opponent was going easy on me. I would have attributed the incident to his supernatural idiocy, if not for the fact that I never felt any killing intent from him throughout the battle. I am not a fool nor an egoist. I am a shinobi who walked with death every day. I know attacks to kill me. This did not mean that his attacks were not strong enough to kill me, though it was. They were probably strong enough to blow up the moon. Instead, what it meant was that his attacks, no matter how strong, lacked the desire to kill me. They held no hatred towards me. Maybe they held anger and maybe a desire to hurt me. But not to the extent of killing me. He was looking down on me, on my belief, and on my determination. That may not be his intention, but that's what he did. I sat and rushed at him with a lightning-covered hand. I swept at him. My intention was clear, to separate his head from his shoulder. But at the last moment, he ducked and gave me an uppercut to the chin. I was aware of the incoming counterattack even before he was. I saw it coming clearly. His body was too weak to hide its intention. But I was weaker, not being able to move a single muscle, even though my mind was clear about my next action. Bam. His fist met my chin, and the force sent me flying. I crashed at the side of a rocky hill, and it made a deep crater that cradled my broken body. I felt pain and exhaustion throughout my whole body. My muscles felt like they were eating themselves. I felt too much, and I couldn't bear it. So I just stopped feeling altogether and just act. My body was moving even with all the burden. I don't know how, and I didn't know why. I got up, angry, frustrated, but most of all confused. I asked, why was he not willing to kill me when I was prepared to do so? Why was he willing to go so far for me? Why was he so stubborn? I beat the rocky wall as I asked, why? Why are you doing this? Why wouldn't you just let me cut you down? Naruto, I looked down at him. He looked up. His face was decorated with blood, but his blue eyes stole my gaze. His eyes hid no dagger. He shakily stood up and puffed out his chest to not look as he was tired and weak. His eyes twinkled with childlike honesty. It's because he said, I am your only friend, Sasuke. Silence. The words made me feel things I should not feel. Unfamiliar emotions bubbled up from within me. Feelings I thought I forgot. They told me to stop, but I couldn't. I have gone too far. I have done too much. I have dived too deep. It's too late for me to stop and turn back. So I pushed those feelings down and buried them to the deepest part of my soul. Then, the hatred I had always cherished in my heart bloomed and devoured its confines, which was my heart. I did not reply further. I did not comment on how stupid his answer was, nor how it made me feel. But that just revealed exactly how I feel. My silence tells nothing but said everything. I gathered all the chakra I had. Everything, every little bit I could muster. Lightning came alive in my left hand. The lightning was concentrated and cut everything in its vicinity, even the air. A chilling sound broke the silence and took its place. It was like the chirping sound of 1,000 birds. A tune of terror, a song of death. Chidori. I called out his name. The sound was soothing me, telling me that whatever happens next, good or bad, it would be quick. And I sincerely hoped it would be quick. Naruto also gathered chakra in his right hand. The energy revolved around above his palm at blinding speed, creating a bowl. Rasengan. I heard him mutter the name. We stood there, looking at each other. Preparing for the attacks, we both knew, would be the last. Then, we both leaped in each other's direction. I jumped down from my place, and he jumped up to meet me. As I fell towards him, I didn't know if it was real or if it's exhaustion playing tricks on my mind, but I saw people behind Naruto. One by one, they appeared behind him, supporting him, wishing him the best, giving him their love and will. There were too many and too bright. I was overwhelmed. I was alone. I was unsure. But then, I felt a presence behind me. One that was big. His presence love was as much as all the other people behind Naruto combined, I feel. A whisper echoed in my mind, I will love you always. I knew I was no longer alone, I was no longer overwhelmed. I was sure. Without holding back. I gave it my all. Naruto, Sasuke boom. The battle of brothers, the world mourned for both. Sasuke's POV I lost. A sense of confusion struck my soul, as if I had just awakened even though I have always been awake in an unknown world. The need for energy or effort was hardly recognizable when controlling the lids of one's eyes. Yet, I found it rather difficult to even move my cascading shields. My body was bathed with a sense of pain and exhaustion that made me numb. I tried to move with enough effort to move a mountain, but I could not move a single muscle. What happened to me? I questioned myself, and as an answer, I remembered the fight I just had. Right. I just fought. I moved my eyes, my mind was swirling, and my body was worn out, but my vision was clear. It was so much so that I took in all the little, intricate details of the world. I looked around, taking in the form and shapes of my environment. I felt foreign to my surroundings, yet at the same time it was extremely familiar. Each time I saw a new thing, I would question myself. Why is that hill destroyed? Where am I? Why is that tree uprooted? And to these questions, the answers would come to me. The hill was destroyed by our battle. I am at the valley of the end, the tree must have been uprooted due to the shockwave. And when I got these, or rather recollect these answers, I would affirm myself, yeah, that's right. After that, I would feel stupid for asking the questions in the first place. I spent some time pondering like this, questioning and answering myself. I did so until I skimmed through all my life, who I was, what I did, and why I did it. It was like I was revising my life. When I had no more questions and when the only thing left was the feeling of something being off, did I stop? Are you okay, Sasuke? I heard a voice. It was coarse, but that did not hide the concern it held. I turned to look at the face of the boy. His face was bruised, and dried blood could be seen under his chin and nose. His left eye was purple and swollen, blocking his eye. And as if to compensate for it, his other eye was bright and mesmerizing blue. It was the clearest blue eye I had ever seen. It reflects innocence and harbors no malice. I observed those eyes for a while before a name popped into my head. Naruto. I did not question anything this time. Instead, I found it rather strange how easily I accepted it. And he called me Sasuke. That's me. I'm fine, just tired, I said, closing my eyes. I thought about my situation again while I rested. You're not going to die just after I convinced you, right? He asked, his voice a little closer this time. I opened my eyes and saw him pushing up with one arm and looking at me intently. I chuckled and said, of course not. Right. He convinced me to change my path and turn over a new leaf. Maybe that was why I was feeling strange and somewhat different. I smiled. The talk no jutsu was really powerful. Even Pain gave his life to revive all the people he killed after experiencing the jutsu. So, me feeling strange was very mild. I chuckled. Wait, how did I know that? I had no memories of Naruto and Pain talking together, but I am fairly certain they did, as if I had seen them talk with my own eyes. This was too vivid. I was alarmed now, about what was really happening to me. But before I could dive deeper and ponder on the question, I heard a voice that called out my name with such worry that I froze mentally and physically. Sasuke. It was the voice of a girl. Her tone tells desperation and obvious anxiety. I looked toward the source and I saw a pink-haired girl carrying a man on her back. She was on top of the valley. She placed the man down, and after exchanging brief words with him, she jumped down from the height. She landed gracefully and hurriedly made her way towards us. She gasped when she took a close look at us, and without prompt, she crouched down between me and Naruto. I looked to the side and noticed my left arm was absent. I also noticed Naruto's right arm was gone, and the blood that oozed out from our injury connected, giving the impression of us holding hands. The girl's hands began glowing green, and I felt my body being assaulted by a warm energy that seemed to revitalize every cell in my body. The warmth finally enabled me to feel a sensation other than pain. The name of the girl materialized in my head, Sakura. I looked up at her face and met her eyes. Her eyes were emerald green, sparkling with life and awareness. In front of her dazzling green orbs, my black eyes were guilty. I'm sorry, I said, not even sure of what exactly I was apologizing for. It's too many. I had hurt her so much. Her body shook, and tears began forming in those living eyes of hers. Her hands were busy, so they could not wipe away her tears, so they fell and fell and fell. I'm sorry. What for? She asked, thinking I did nothing to her that deserved her forgiveness. My heart became solid. It was heavy. I am so sorry, I said again. This time I braided every word with my emotions. I did not apologize for anything. I apologized for everything. Everything that happened after that was blurry. My mind was constantly racing, thinking, trying to remember something. Something important, something missing. I felt incomplete. I felt like I had lost something. It was akin to trying to remember a name or idea you used to know, something you made sure to not forget, but did anyway. It was so close. It was in the perpetual state of forever lost and found. I was vaguely aware as Naruto and I formed a rat seal with our hands, and released everyone from the infinite Tsukuyomi, pulling out the people around the world from their perfect dream. I was barely conscious as I released the tailed beasts from my control, Chibaku Tensei. They were suspended in the sky, and they began falling when I released my control. Some of my chakra returned to me as I did that. It cleared my cloudy mind a bit. The deafening sound that erupted the moment they landed on the ground was something that worked to make me more awake. I was doing fine. I was getting better. Until I was not. I staggered. Naruto noticed me and came to support me. My mind was getting hammered, my heart was beating rapidly, and the thumping of it made me deaf. The voice of Sakura was distorted as she asked me if I was okay. No, I was not okay. Then I passed out. Sasuke SPOV. I stirred from my slumber, and my eyes cautiously opened. I noticed that I did not need to put in effort or strength to do that. I pulled myself up and sat on the bed I found myself in. I looked around the room, a hospital. My mind instantly worked to search for the best escape route, and I scanned the area for traps or weapons. My mind was unconscious. It felt strange, but at the same time, I was familiar with these sensations. I trained hard to acquire these senses, after all. My mind was not clouded now. I no longer felt incomplete, nor did I feel something missing. I felt new and refreshed. Now, I was aware and knew exactly what had happened to me. Soul fusion and reincarnation. Both me from this world and me from another world died, and by some weird stroke of fate, their souls fused, and I am the product of it. One part of me was Uchiha Sasuke, and the other part was someone from a world where Sasuke Uchiha was fiction. Both of them were me, but I was not them. Sasuke died after he admitted his defeat to Naruto. The connection between his soul and body was snapped, and his soul was leaving his body. But a new soul, me or should I say the someone from another world fused with his soul, and this new soul pushed itself back into Sasuke's body. This new soul is me, both Sasuke and the someone from another world. But I would say, the Sasuke part of me was more since I am in his body with his habits, instincts, etc. I carried both the emotional baggage of these two, as well as my own, since I am neither of them now. I sighed. How complicated. Then, as if to mock me, my mind wandered to the possible future. The incoming enemies were momentarily stopped only by time. I groaned, how sophisticated and complicated. Third POV, not long after he had woken up, someone came inside the room. It was a nurse, and Sasuke was able to learn that he had passed out and slept for almost an entire day. He also got to know that the others were at the cemetery, having a funeral for the war heroes. Sasuke thanked the nurse and got up. The nurse urged him not to, but Sasuke insisted he was fine. His arm and many parts of his body were wrapped in bandages, so he asked for black-colored clothes. The nurse went out of the room, and after a while she came back with black clothes. With the type of clothes people typically wear at funerals, the nurse could somehow guess that Sasuke wanted to attend the funeral. "Here, wear these, it should fit you," she said. "Thank you." Then the nurse bowed her head and left the room, giving Sasuke some privacy to get changed. Sasuke got dressed and went towards the window of the room. He gazed out from it, he looked down, and a part of him was nervous. He put one foot on the window frame, took a deep breath and leaped out. His body took control, and he was able to swiftly maneuver on top of the roofs. Part of him was unsure, but his feet carried him, almost as if he was flying. As he leaped from one roof to another, he noticed that he made no sound. He also noticed the power his legs held. Even in their fatigued state, he knew he could move fast, extremely fast. Sasuke soon finished his run like that, aware yet surprised of his capabilities. On the other hand, he knew he had done this almost all his life, and on the other, it felt new to him. It was a weird feeling. He reached the cemetery and saw thousands of people dressed in black. The mood was gloomy, with occasional sobs and sad music. These emotions washed over Sasuke as well as his face sat in a sad frown. He stood a good distance away from the people, where he could observe with no one noticing him. He leaned his shoulder on a tree and he watched. Sasuke mourned. Sasuke regretted. And since he was Sasuke now, he mourns and regrets. Third POV, the people of Konoha gathered in the cemetery. It was a requiem, a funeral for the Shinobis who gave their lives to protect, not only the present but the future as well. The air was heavy, and thick with emotions of grief and sadness. The silence that persisted was only broken by the occasional sobs that only worked to inflict more pain in the hearts of the people. The sun was setting, it looked as if it was melting on the horizon. A dull orange illuminates the world, as if also saddened by the death of life. Covered in that depressing light, no one could stop their tears. They mourned for the people they could no longer hold. They mourned for the love they had lost. Tears flow and flow and flow. They cried and cried and cried. Not because they are weak, but because they have been strong for a long time. Sasuke watches all this from a distance. His lips rest in a thin line that hides a stretch of sadness. He observed them for a long time until the funeral was coming to an end. Then he turned around and ran in the same direction that he came from. He leaped from roof to roof, and the sight of the village became blurry due to his speed. In the span of a short time, he reached the hospital again. As he neared the window of his room, he noticed the peculiar state of the room, but he went in anyway. The moment he set one foot inside the hospital room, the sharp edge of a sword touched his neck. "You are under arrest, Sasuke-chiha," said the one holding the sword in a stern voice. He scanned the room and located 4 other Shinobis. From their masks and attire, they were Anbu. Sasuke slowly put his hand up and let them cuff him. He was expecting this. He was an international criminal that has done deeds worthy of such status. He was instead grateful that they allowed him to spend time at the funeral, considering they knew his location, and therefore could arrest him earlier. There was a tracker tag in the pocket of his clothes to begin with. They cuffed him and made him wear blindfolds before taking him to the deepest level of Konoha prison, where they kept S-class criminals. SASUK there was deafening silence throughout my cell. It amplified my thoughts, making them seem like voices in my head. It was cold and the smell of iron pierced my nose. I did not know the appearance, size, or color of my surroundings, as they covered my eyes. My whole body was also covered, with both my arms and hand tightly tied to my chest in such a way that I could not weave a single hand sign. Which was stupid, considering I only had one hand and wouldn't be able to weave a hand sign anyway. But if that made them relax, I won't judge. There was also some kind of sealed device that suppressed my chakra, or at least tried to. I could break free anytime, but I did not, choosing to stay as I am now and waiting for the time when I would be released as per what happened in canon. Which was not really reliable when I think about it, as my knowledge from the show Naruto could be an alternate version of the world I am in. I don't think I could depend on it too much. Or maybe I could, and I am just making excuses because I don't want to accept what I know of the future. The Atsutsukas, Boruto, Sarada, and me being out of chakra, etc. If this knowledge were indeed accurate or maybe even just partially true, then there will be a storm in the future. Something much bigger than what we have faced. Something big enough to mark the end of the shinobi world as we know it. And I was the only one who knew about it, and therefore the only one who could stop it. But to do so I needed something which I have sought all my life: power. Again, it all comes down to how powerful I am. I thought I would finally have a break after finally reaching the pinnacle of shinobi strength. But here I am, still too weak to face the upcoming storm. Hahaha. I let out dry chuckles, laughing at my own predicament. My chuckles reverberated and echoed in the lonely cell. Making my thoughts literal, I was laughing at myself. Now that I had time alone for myself, I really got a chance to observe myself. How I feel, and how I think. And turns out, I had serious mental issues. Who would have guessed? It was quiet and lonely, which definitely did not help my mental state, which was in absolute pieces. It was understandable. Sasuke had gone through so much manipulation and trauma that it's just sad. Anger, hate, envy, greed, sorrow and grief. These were the emotions his heart feasted on before he was eventually made to realize that he was walking down the wrong path. Then these emotions were replaced with overwhelming guilt and self-loathing. It was a wonder how the original Sasuke dealt with all of these alone. He was so mentally destroyed, yet had no one to talk to. Luckily, I was not just Sasuke anymore, I was more. So in that lonely cell, I picked myself up piece by piece. I was the doctor and the patient, healing myself in the silence of isolation. Time passed, and in that passing time, I also planned about the future and imagined my next course of action. Being alone in that cell proved to be a blessing in disguise with fruitful results. But it was not like I was undisturbed throughout my time spent here. Frequently I would be visited by someone and they would feed me a pill. It was most likely the Akimichi food pills, which were often eaten instead of a meal during missions. It was around 201,612 seconds, or nearly 3 days, I was forced to count to tell the time, after I was put into this cell, that the distinct footfalls of 2 people caught my ears. Unlike the times when someone came to feed me, the sound indicated 2 people, and the sound was more rhythmic and lighter. I waited and listened. The sound became louder and louder, indicating that they were getting closer and closer. One set of footsteps was slightly louder, which tells me that it belonged to someone big. They reached the door of my cell. I heard the sound of a key opening the cell, and the door creaked as it was opened. I turned to let them know I noticed them. Sasuke. I heard a familiar voice. Kakashi. Sasuke Chiha, after consideration of your crime and assist in the war, the 5 cages have decided against releasing you. Said a stern voice that belonged to the person beside Kakashi. Took more than 2 days, but finally, I was free. Third POV Sasuke was taken out of prison, and was instantly transported to the hospital where the doctors made sure he was physically healthy. He was also greeted by Sakura, who was crying tears of joy when she realized he was free. It was quite an emotional moment even for Sasuke, to know that there were people who cared so much for someone like him. Someone who was so bitter. He was glad, and it honestly felt underserved. He was checked by the doctors for other illnesses or permanent injuries, and when they found none and were sure that he was recovering, they let him go. After leaving the hospital, he went around Konoha visiting his old friends and apologizing to them personally. They were not rude, but they were not that welcoming either. Understandable. He also went to the Reikage and Killer Bee. Killer Bee was cool about it, but the Reikage was understandably still upset. If it was up to me, you would rot in that cell, kid. Were the kindest words he could give him. There were others he wanted to talk to as well, but the day was limited. It was dark, and he was about to go eat at a restaurant when he was invited to dinner by the new Hokage and his sensei, Kakashi. SASUK SPOV. The place was busy, people were chatting and laughing as they enjoyed their meals after a long day of work. The sweet aroma of flavor spread in the nearby surroundings. The smell alone made the saliva in one's mouth delicious. We sat in a corner where there was a little curtain for privacy. We were quiet and Kakashi silently poured sake in small cups for me. So, what might be your next plan, Sasuke? Kakashi asked me as he sipped his sake. His lazy yet sharp eyes bore on me, observing me even when it looked like he didn't. I will travel the world, I said as I ate the food on my table. It had been long since the last time I had a proper dinner. Kakashi did not speak, indicating that he wanted me to say more. The war just ended and villages are in good relationship, but that the OESN mean that evil characters are gone from this world. I said, to which he nodded. No matter how I tell myself otherwise, I felt responsible and wanted to repent for my crimes to a certain degree. Maintaining peace and protecting the village, as my brother would. But why leave the village? Honestly, why should I stay in the village? I said a part of me felt responsible for repenting for my crimes and protecting the village. But a part of me was also rather salty about what the village had done to me. But I wouldn't say that, so I went with another excuse, which was also a reason for me leaving the village. I stopped eating and looked at him. I pointed my eye, and he seemed to get what I meant as he nodded. I possessed a Rinnegan and Sharingan, and many people in this world would kill or destroy a village for my eyes. Staying in the village will just expose the village to unnecessary dangers of being attacked. This may sound extremely foolish, considering people are aware of the strength of the village, Naruto, and even me. But that is exactly what people are sometimes, foolish when they are blinded by greed. I might be able to absolutely defeat any attackers, but even if a single civilian died because of that, it would be unacceptable. So it would be best if I leave and avoid any trouble. And to gain power, which was mostly the reason why I am leaving. I could also carry out any missions during that time. I said and continued speaking, but could you do me a favor, Kakashi-sensei? I added the sensei part as I was about to ask him for a huge thing. It took some time, but after some persuasion, he agreed with my request after a huge sigh. I felt bad taking advantage of his kindness, but I really wanted. We continued chatting about various things, from asking me for information about criminals to lecturing me. It was a fun time we shared that night. He also told me about Naruto's predicament of having to study, which was why I did not meet him today. Soon, the moon hung higher and higher into the sky, prompting us to end our discussion. We said goodnight and we parted ways. I went to a hotel to spend the night. I cleaned myself and sought the bed immediately. The sun was rising on the horizon, penetrating the blanket of darkness that once covered the world. The air was chilly, but the sun was warm. Birds were chirping as if to welcome the sun, as if to celebrate the new day. On this morning, I stood at the giant gate of Konoha. Kakashi and Sakura were in front of me. They had come to bid me farewell. I really appreciated the gesture. That's the thing you asked for, Kakashi said as he threw a scroll at me. I caught and stared at it intently before cutting my eyes to his. Thank you, I said with a small bow. Be too reckless out there, okay? Or else the blame is going to be on me. He dropped his head to the side and gave me a closed-eyed smile. I nodded. Then I turned my head to the side to look at the girl. I avoided looking in fear that I might look at her too much. She had short pink hair that reminded of the tree that bears the same name as her. The occasional breeze that blew teased her hair, forcing them to dance at its tunes like cherry blossoms. Her face was lovely, with each part the right size and in the right place. My eyes can't help but search for imperfections, but they failed as of now. She had emerald eyes that reflected everything, making me want to look at the world only through her eyes, because I was sure it must be more beautiful. Her eyes scampered around, looking everywhere but me. She had a blush on her cheeks which complemented her hair. She seemed more like a flower than a human. I observed her with a straight face while her eyes gathered courage and confidence. Then finally, with a pensive face that only worked to make her cute, she looked at me. Sasuke. That's my name. I never knew my name was so pretty. Ha, I am down bad. Who could blame me? I find her unhealthy obsession to me extremely attractive. Maybe because it kinda reminds me of my brother. Or maybe it's a Chiha thing. Couldn't you stay for a while? Lady Tsunade is making an artificial arm with Lord Hashirama's cell, and you could wait for her to finish, she said, and I could almost see her fist bumping herself, because she said that without a stutter. Absolutely. I wanted to say to the crazy girl who claimed to love me since forever for God knows why. Her reasons for loving me were still unfathomable to me even with my knowledge. But I see T held my heart melting for her when I knew more than ever how much she was and is willing to go for me. I'm sorry, Sakura, I said, and her eyes tore away from mine and bore down on the ground. Her lips spread in a thin smile, a little embarrassed at being rejected, but more sad than anything. Of course, what was I expecting seems to be her line of thoughts. She was like an open book, and with my eyes, I was easily able to read her. But I will return soon to get the arm if I am allowed so, I said, and she perked up immediately. She looked expectantly at Kakashi. Fine, he said. She smiled and turned her head to look at me again. Her gaze turned shy and she played with her fingers as she said, and what if I said I go with you? I held myself back from laughing out. Talk about being clingy and desperate, this girl was both and more. This girl really is a hopeless simpede. But I don't hate that, she is my simpede after all. Many might find it annoying, but to me it was absolutely precious. What kind of man would not like its son-new waifu to be obsessed with you? I reckon not me. I smiled, a genuine smile that seemed to stun her if her expressions were anything to go by. I moved a bit closer and with my 2 fingers, I tapped her forehead. Thank you. But maybe next time. I turned around and took my leave after that. The yellow sand beneath my feet and the yellow sun made my path almost glow golden. I could feel her passionate gaze follow me all the way until I was out of sight. It felt good, and I feel giddiness in my heart when I think about the fact that someone was eagerly waiting for my return, something like leaving a puppy for work. I left the village without turning back. But just as I was out of sight, a yellow-haired boy was standing by the side of the road. I stopped and observed. He came in front of me and stood his ground. He had a smile that showed his white rows of teeth, and he seemed content. Naruto. We did not talk, instead, we let the silence work its magic. Silence can say as much as many words glued together. We stood there under the golden sunlight, as if confirming what the other person truly meant to us. We acknowledged each other's presence. We were rivals, we are brothers. Then Naruto brought something out. It was an old headband that belonged to me long ago. I had abandoned it when I left the village, but it looked like he had kept it. I took it from his hand and observed the headband. Memories flood in my head, and I helped myself from smiling at how things turn out. I am glad things played out the way it did. No words were needed. I moved past him, and I slowly walked away with graceful strides. I feel light, and for the first time in forever, I feel okay. I am okay. But I could not stay idle, for threats far beyond anything we have ever known were looming over us. And I would make sure to protect the things I had gained. But to do so I needed more strength, more techniques. More I may not walk the path of revenge anymore, but it seems I could not stray away from the path of power. I took out the scroll Kakashi gave me and read aloud the name of the technique written, Flying Thunder God Technique. Power. If that's what it takes to protect what I have, then I will have power. Third POV. The wild breeze was his only companion, and dark clouds loomed over him. His feet did not make a sound as he walked on the jungle road. His steps were calm, and his stride was measured, as if he thought carefully before he took each step. He wore a black cloak that covered his whole body. Not letting anyone know what weapons he hid under that black fabric, nor giving them information about his body. Was he muscular, fat, skinny? One could only guess. His hair would move under the influence of the wind, giving it the illusion of being alive, and his strange purple eye that he covered with his bangs would be revealed when that happens. No expression hung on his face. It was stoic, almost robotic, yet his face carried no flaws. He was handsome. It had been 3 days since Sasuke had left the village. 3 days since he last saw what he considered now as his home. During this time, Sasuke had gotten himself familiar with the Flying Thunder God. The space-time ninjutsu was simple enough for him. The only thing required of him was to learn the seal, and have a basic understanding of Fuinjutsu, which was easy, because his Rinnegan was basically able to comprehend complex codes like seals, as if they were ABC. The true requirements to learn the Flying Thunder God were insane reaction speed, monstrous reflex, and godlike spatial awareness. Sasuke had all these in spades and more. He had a very high affinity with space and time due to his Rinnegan. So the only thing he needed to put effort into was learn how to write the seal correctly and learn some basic Fuinjutsu. The Fuinjutsu allowed him to mark anything as long as he touched it without having to write down a seal to mark a target. With all these advantages coupled with his genius talent, it took no time at all for him to get the basics down. He could teleport from one place to another quite easily now, but using it during fights was still another thing. He would have to heavily modify his fighting styles. It would take a long time to do that, and even longer time to completely master it, but he was satisfied with the results for now. It should not be mistaken that since Sasuke was able to learn it easily, that other people would be able to do it as well. Sasuke's reaction speed and his ability to easily comprehend codes like Fuinjutsu alone were something only he possessed. It was almost like the technique was made for him, which was ironic considering it was made to kill an Uchiha. Sasuke was already beyond the fire country, and he was wandering in the thick jungles of the country of rain. He was searching for something. He made his way through the thick jungles with abundant moisture in the air. There were many insects, and especially mosquitoes seemed to thrive around this jungle. This part of the forest is not disturbed by humans, as the thick vegetation makes it hard to navigate, and because there were rumors that a monster lived in these parts. Forget normal people, even bandits avoided these areas. He walked for a few more miles in that thick jungle before he made it to a cave. It was well hidden with the tall trees and hills, but Sasuke knew he was in the right place. Sasuke entered the cave, and even before he went 10 meters inside, a hissing sound echoed through the cave. It was a chilly sound that would make any normal man freeze on the spot, but Sasuke showed no reaction. Then out of the deep darkness of the cave, 2 slit eyes like that of a snake opened. The distance between the 2 eyes was enough to tell anyone that the creature with those eyes was humongous. The creature hissed again and slowly moved towards Sasuke. His form became visible, and it revealed a giant red snake. Sasuke was still like a statue the whole time, then his right eye briefly turned red. There was a blood-red glow for a moment before the huge snake collapsed on the ground with a thud. Sasuke observed the fallen snake for a bit before walking past it and entering deeper into the cave. He did not walk for long, and the end of the cave soon became visible. But among the stone wall, there was a door, a steel door. Sasuke did not even need to reach the door before it opened up, and a figure stepped out. It was someone who played an important role in shaping what he was now as a shinobi. "What might bring you all this way here, Sasuke?" said the figure, his voice holding amusement and friendliness that made Sasuke tense up a bit. "Orochimaru." The irony, he wanted to laugh at himself. He was sure that he would never need anything from this slimy psychopath again. Almost 4 years ago, he went to him, seeking power. Now he came back to him again in search of the same thing. Sasuke SPOV Orochimaru did not say another word, and he only gestured for me to follow him. Beyond the steel door lies a dimly lit corridor that seems to stretch far beyond the eye can see. There were other doors on the side of the wall which led to different rooms and facilities. We walked together in silence before Orochimaru opened one of the doors and went in. My heartbeat slowed down, and my body was prepared to respond to anything. I cautiously went inside as well. I went in. The place was like a laboratory, and everything a doctor could possibly need was tightly fitted inside. I scanned the room, making sure there were no traps. Orochimaru sat on a chair and he leaned sideways on a table in a laid-back manner. A smile hung on his lips, amused at my vigilance around him. That snake. I knew I was stronger and could possibly take on anything he could throw at me. But it was just natural to be vigilant around him, like in the presence of a snake. He was enjoying how he could still put me so on edge by his mere presence. But he was also careful to not push the wrong buttons. "So, what would be the purpose of your visit?" I reckon it's not because you miss me, he said in his slimy voice. This guy has a natural talent for creeping people out. I require some things from you. Oh, and what might that be? He asked with a glint in his snake-like eyes. I could see how his mind worked on how he could benefit from the situation. It was me who needed things from him after all. I gathered my thoughts and waited for some time, then I said what I wanted from him. All the jutsus that you have, be it ninjutsu, taijutsu, fuinjutsu, kinjutsu or jinjutsu. He tilted his head in wonder, wondering why I would ask for that. He was in for another surprise when I said my next demands. A new sword, another kusanagi or something at that level. And finally, the location of Ryuchi Cave. I could also try to reverse summon myself if he disagreed, but to learn Sage Mode, I think it was necessary to find it and pass the 3 trials. He paused for a while, his brain connecting the dots before he burst into hysterical laughter. You still haven't changed, do you, Sasuke? He shook his head, laughter still slipping out of his throat. I needed the power to kill before, but now I needed the power to protect. They may be fundamentally different, but I needed the same thing in both cases, which was power. So I guess he's right, I haven't changed in that regard. I am still the power-hungry Sasuke. Can you do it or not? He stopped, looking at my eyes. He inched forward a bit. I could, but why should I? My lips curved a bit, because then, you get to keep your life. I said, or more like asked. That seems to amuse him greatly. No one can kill me, Sasuke, you should know better. I do. I was not sure if he would die even if I ripped his soul from his body, which I could with the Rinnegan. But if he did not die, I would just be making an enemy a very annoying enemy. It's just not worth it. I am one of the most competent shinobi to have ever existed. I possess the legendary Eternal Magic Sharingan and the Rinnegan. I'm sure I have something you want, be it information, service, etc. He smiled and meaningfully licked his lips. You. I'm sure we can, Sasuke. He hissed those words out. Sasuke's POV. We had a talk which lasted way shorter than I was expecting before we came to the same agreement. I noticed that Orochimaru was very reserved in his demands. Was it because he was trying to be nice, or maybe because of our difference in strength? I did not know. But in the end, we came to an agreement that I had no problem with. In exchange for what I needed, he asked me for information about my eyes. He had one mission for me, which I could refuse if I didn't like the mission, and finally my blood. All of these were okay with me. Giving information about my eyes, especially the Rinnegan, seems unwise, but I don't think it would make much of a difference if he knew about its abilities. I will not tell him about the 7th path or the special ability I acquired with my eyes, but sharing the basic abilities such as the 6 paths was no problem for me. Next was the mission. I had no problem with that, as long as it did not involve the assassination of innocents. The third and the thing I was most worried about was giving my blood. I was afraid of him cloning me and other stuff, but in the end the thing that made me who I am was never my body. I did not have an insane body like Hashirama and Naruto. What made me special had mostly always been my chakra and genius, which cannot be acquired using my blood. He also already had my blood from when I was under him, and I was sure my blood would just be like that of any other Uchiha. So in the end I agreed to give him my blood. There were very mild requests considering what I asked for, but maybe it because in a twisted way, he considers me his student, or maybe he wanted to win my favor. Either way, it had served to benefit me. We finalized our deal, and Orochimaru called someone on a strange device that was on the table. Only 10 seconds later the door was slammed open and Karin entered the room. Her heavy breathing indicated that she ran here as fast as she could. Her eyes immediately found mine, and they shook like a fish caught in a net, struggling yet could not move away. I also looked at her, emotions swirling in the deepest depth of my dark eyes. Memories of the time I spent with her flashed in my mind, and I help but think. I was a jerk. But it seems that for all the bad things I did to her, she did not hold me responsible because she gave me a sweet smile. She hid the tears that welled up in her eyes, and shyly moved close to me. Sasuke, why do you tell me you were coming? She said in a tone that could not be further away from hating me. I did not know how to respond, and before I even found out how, Orochimaru said, "Show Sasuke the way to the Jutsu library." Karin nodded at Orochimaru's orders, then her eyes widened. She asked with little excitement, "Are you staying, Sasuke?" Both of them looked at me for an answer. I thought about it for a while, and decided to stay here in seclusion while I train before going back to Konoha for my arm. "I will stay for some time," I said with a nod. Karin beamed a smile at me, and for some weird reason so did Orochimaru. Karin then took me to the room where there were many scrolls. She was all smiles when she was around me. She told me about which part contains Jinjutsu, Ninjutsu, etc., and she showed me the different parts of the room. She really enjoyed being around me, but after some time she reluctantly had to leave. The place was lit brightly by glowing orbs on the wall. Mountains of books were stacked on top of each other, and scrolls were neatly arranged in shelves. It was quiet. I suspected that the walls must be soundproof, but I could be wrong, and it could just be that it was naturally quiet. I don't think many people lived here. I could only sense around 5 people in the whole base. I looked around at the room and noticed the open space which could be used to try out new jutsus. Good. I took a deep breath, and with a light-hearted chuckle, I said, let the training arc begin. Time skip. 2 weeks, Sasuke's POV. My brain felt like it was wounded. There were bees inside my head buzzing and stinging. A result of taking in too much information in such a short time. It has been a total of 2 weeks since I arrived at the secret base of Orochimaru. 2 weeks that revealed itself to be as tiring as it was fruitful. I have absorbed many jutsus during this short time, and I have covered more than half of the jutsus here, which is more than thousands. The number of jutsus, especially ninjutsu, that Orochimaru had collected was insane. It was a miracle that I managed to soak up more than half of these in only 2 weeks. My great affinity with all the elements granted by the Rinnegan and the photographic memories of the Sharingan were a huge help in learning these jutsus. But learning them did not mean mastering them. That would take time, but for now, just knowing the jutsus was enough. When I was younger, I was never interested in learning new, weak jutsus. I was a believer that being a master of stronger jutsus was better than learning many new jutsus. And since my affinity was fire and lightning, I never even tried to learn other elements. But I knew better now. Knowledge was also power. I already knew many of the jutsus from fire and lightning elements, so I was mostly busy with the other elements, especially water. But the thing I focused on the most was Fuinjutsu. I was a natural at the art of Fuinjutsu. Again, my Rinnegan showed how overpowered it truly was. I was easily able to learn the Fuinjutsu, which was akin to a language code that can affect chakra. I was stressed and mentally drained. I sat down on the ground and leaned on one of the many shelves. Several scrolls and books about Kinjutsu and Taijutsu sprawl all over the floor. I stayed in that position for a while. I gave my mind a much-needed rest and stopped thinking. I sat there for minutes in silence, no more thinking, just feeling. My mind became refreshed and the headache slowly melted away. Then the door of the room opened. I instantly got alerted and only loosened up when I saw it was Karin. She was wearing a black skin-tight bodysuit that accentuated her curves, daring my eyes to look somewhere other than at her. Her red hair was messy, yet it does not give the impression of disorder. Instead, those messy locks contained an unusual charm that I could not pinpoint. Her face was soft and feminine. Her crimson eyes and rosy lips were a key point to her alluring form. She came towards me with a tray of food, and when she placed the tray on the ground, she made sure to let her breast jiggle. Gravity was her friend as it seemed she accomplished her goal. I could not help myself from staring at it. You should take a rest and eat, Sasuke, she said with a flower in her voice. She had been low-key seducing me during my entire stay in this space, and I can't help but be amazed at my ability to make girls obsessed with me. It was kind of nostalgic actually. She had been trying to seduce me for as long as I can remember. I had been cruel and even tried to kill her, but here she was, looking at me with the eyes of a girl in love. I could not understand how, nor could I understand why. How can she still love me, and why did she still love me? Or was it even love? Well, she's a crazy girl, I guess. Oh, I know. How about I feed you since you look so tired, Sasuke? She said and clapped her hands together. She picked up the bowl of rice and carefully scooped a spoonful of that white grain. She blew it ever so lightly at the rice, and she moved the spoon closer to my mouth. Here you go, Sasuke. Ah, she said with a blush that reached her eyes. It was weird, she was weird, but the weirdest of all was me, because I opened my mouth and ate the rice. I actually ate it. I surprised her and even myself. The part of me that fused with Sasuke was extremely pleased, as if he just accomplished his lifelong dream. Karin's eyes shook, and she naturally flinched back as she was surprised, because even though she was doing all that, the idea of me actually accepting never crossed her mind. But neither did mine. She must have been stunned, wondering what happened to me during the short amount of time we were apart. But whatever happened to me, she seemed to like it as she looked shyly to the side with a stupid smile on her face. Her smooth skin reflected red, and I could almost see steam rising from her head. Thank you, Karin. Those words from me seemed to be the last straw as she covered her whole face and released a tiny scream. Then she comically fell on her back due to embarrassment. Cute. She was too cute. A part of me was urging and yelling at me to push her down and do something lewd to her, but I held myself back. A part of me managed to hold back. How desperate. I mocked myself. My thoughts and actions were not like the former Sasuke. That dark and gloomy boy was gone now. This is me now, Sasuke Uchiha. Konoha. 1 month after Sasuke left, Sakura's POV, not to sound like an absolutely obsessed weirdo, but I think it has been 731 hours 56 minutes since he has been out of my sight. I muttered out loud in the silence of the room. I was sitting at my new office, which I moved into just a week before. It was quite spacious and offered a nice view, which I was currently enjoying. The room was filled with rows and rows of shelves containing important files and records. The interior was carefully decorated with flowers, and a few diagrams of the human anatomy and chakra pathway hung on the walls. I turned my head away from the breathtaking view and allowed my eyes to scamper around the room. But as if almost automatic and instinctual, my eyes landed on the framed picture that was seated at the corner of my table. My eyes focused on that picture, specifically on the boy with navy blue hair. My mind was thinking about the boy, wondering if he was okay, if he was happy, and even if he also missed me. An uncontrollable blush surfaced on my cheeks at the thought of him missing and longing for me. No way. This is why I hated taking breaks from work. The moment my mind was idle, it would return to him, almost as if he had total possession of my mind. I could stop because I did want to stop. I lay down on my table and allowed my mind to decorate itself with his image. Just the thought of him was able to make me feel things no one around me was able to make me feel. I knew I was obsessed with him and it was not good for me. I knew my love towards him was strange and unhealthy, but I didn't know how not to love him anymore. Looking back in the past, the logical part of me knew I should not love him anymore, instead I should be hating him. But the way I feel about him now could not be further away from hate. Especially when I recalled our last interaction, it filled me with hope for us in the future. He was not rejecting me anymore, and I hated how happy I was at that simple gesture. I hate it. I hate it. I hate how much I love him. Thinking back on my actions and all the things I did for him, I felt uneasy at the lengths I was willing to go for him. I was willing to give up everything for him, the village, my friends, my family. But I was more mature and wiser now. I was not the little girl from the past anymore, I have grown. So the really sad thing was, when I think about facing those same choices again, I would hesitate, but in the end I would have done the same thing again and chosen him over everything else. God. How can a simple childhood crush that was born out of selfishness develop into whatever this is? I should not worry about sounding like an obsessed weirdo because I am something much worse. Sakura, could you come down to the 7th level emergency room? I need some help. I heard Tsunade voice and immediately perked up, happy to be saved from my thoughts. I did not know why, but I was missing him more badly than any other day. Maybe because it was going to be a full moon night. Time skip. 1 month after leaving Konoha, SPOV, it has been a month since I have stayed in the secret base of Orochimaru, and it has been a few days since I have finished going through all the jutsus present here. I have stayed here a few extra days because Orochimaru still hasn't gotten the sword that I requested, and he asked me to stay a few more days to wait until he got the sword. It had been a few days and just as he promised, he now had the sword I wanted. We were currently at his laboratory, the place was brightly lit, and Orochimaru was wearing a lab coat. Took quite a bit to acquire this, but I'm sure it would suit your taste. Orochimaru said with a smirk and handed me the sword in his hand. I took it and observed it, I activated my eyes and carefully scanned the sword. After a while, I can't help but marvel at the sword, it had no imperfections nor flaws, it was simply without fault. Orochimaru chuckled, seeing my reaction, and said, its name is I no Sho, and it is also called the Kusanagi sword. I have to pull many strings in the land of iron to acquire that one sword. I gave the sword a few swings and felt it moving just as I wanted and intended, it was balanced and light. I then channeled my chakra into the sword, and it started humming slightly with power. It also gave out an eerie light purple glow, that showed how dangerous it was. I retracted my chakra and turned to Orochimaru, it's perfect. I said my honest thought. He gave a chuckle at my response, I knew you would like it. There was no more exchange between us, we just stared at each other for a while. His gaze was truly unnerving, even for me. But luckily, he did not plan to drag out this staring contest. So now that you have this sword, are you leaving tomorrow? He asked as he folded his arms on his chest. Yes, I would leave early in the morning. I said, not planning to stay any longer than necessary. I could not waste my time when the safety of the world depends on me. He nodded and turned around as he said, I wish you a fortune in your journey. Then I left the room and made my way to my cabin, planning to sleep early and return to Konoha first thing in the morning. I gripped the sword in my hand, nervous yet excited about what the future holds for me. Whatever happens, I knew I would survive. I always do. Night Sasuke's POV was dark, no light was allowed in my room as I felt the tension in my muscles relaxing. I allowed my body to rest and not stay so vigilant and alert. The silence was like a lullaby to my ears, the absence of sound was slowly pulling me into a peaceful sleep. That was until the creak of the door woke me up and dispersed all the progress I had made to sleep. My mind was alerted, my body was ready to pounce, yet I lay still. My eyes rolled towards the sound and under the faint light that came from the door. I saw the image of a red-haired girl. What is she doing here? I asked myself and my mind quickly came to few conclusions when I saw the nervous look on her face and her garments. Her black shorts and red-rimmed glasses were not present on her body that night. She wore red panties and a white tank top that sensually hugged her curves, accentuating the size and shape of her ample bosom and trailing over her small waist. The light smoothly fell down on her from behind, giving her skin an ethereal glow. She was looking more enticing than I would have liked. Sasuke. She called my name with need and a hint of longing. Stay down, soldier. I told myself. Then she slowly stepped inside the room. Her long legs were elegantly carrying her in my direction and hypnotizing me at the same time, preventing me from moving away as she made her way towards me. She stood in front of the bed and carefully observed my resting body, and then with 2 or 3 breaths of courage, she moved down on the bed. Her body slid up my body, and I could feel her heat even with the blanket that separated our skin. Her arms were like snakes, and they slither up my body, leaving goosebumps on their trail. Then her hands found my face and they cupped my cheeks. Seeing no resistance on my part, she brought her face closer to mine. She was so close to my face when some sense came back to me, and with every ounce of my will, I managed to stop her. I brought my hands on hers. I said in a whisper, "What are you doing, Karin?" We were so close, a few inches more and our lips would have connected. We exchanged hot puffs of breath as I waited for her response. "I want to love you," she said in a husky voice that penetrated my ears and spread through my nerves. "You should stop, you know I WOULD," returned I said, and I felt her shiver at my words. The room was dark, but I could vividly see her as if she was glowing. In my mind, I begged her to stop giving me this love I knew I did not deserve. It was taking all my strength and discipline to hold myself back. A part of me was not sorry for how I had wronged her, and it told me to take her. I did not know how long I could say no. She was the one who tried to force herself on me all the time. It's fine, right? I pushed those thoughts aside. If I could love her back, I might have acted differently, but I knew. I cannot love you back, at least not like how you want me to. She moved her body and straddled me on the bed. She leaned down and connected her head with mine. "When have you ever cared about others?" she asked, and I could not answer. She brought her face even closer, her lips brushed against mine, and I looked at her crimson eyes that seemed to shine with passion in the dark. "My feelings for you are not as innocent as you believed. I don't care if you returned them," she trailed off. "Just accept them," she said and pushed her lips against mine. I did as she asked. I stopped hesitating and accepted everything she wanted to give me. We kissed and touched, seeking each other's warmth. I feel her arms, which were filled with scars, evidence to how wrong I and others have treated her. I kissed them gently, as if to make it up to her, and asked for forgiveness at the same time. She asked me if it was ugly, and I told her it was beautiful. I assured her she was beautiful. On that full moon night, in that cabin hidden from the world, Karin Uzumaki gave herself to me, and I wholeheartedly accepted her. Her addiction to me, her insanity, her unhealthy attraction towards my chakra, and everything else, I accepted. And for that one memorable night, I forgot about the impending doom, I forgot my burden, and I forgot my regrets. Everything else melted away that night, and I only focused on receiving what she was giving me. Her selfish love. Because love was selfish. And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. Catch you in the next one.